If you've been looking for a new or certified Toyota, come be part of the team. With inventory arriving daily, we'll help you find a vehicle that works for your lifestyle and budget. We'll continue to ensure that your next buying experience is as safe and efficient as possible. Our service center is open with easy online scheduling and a quick, clean process to get you back on the road safely. Head to teamtoyota.net and be safe, be strong, be a team. Hey folks, welcome to the Phillies Talk podcast presented by Team Toyota. I'm Corey Seidman and he's Jim Salisbury, and baseball is locked out. This is what we expected. The CBA expired Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. and the league was unable to reach an agreement with the Players Association on a new deal. Jim, there was that frenzy of free agent activity in the days leading up to the lockout. The Phillies made a couple of moves themselves, which we're going to discuss here coming up, but first, let's go through the key points of the lockout and what it means. Obviously, there's no major league roster moves and no player movement, but kind of take us through some of the other details of what this means. What are some other things teams and players can't do during this period, however long it lasts?
Well, I mean, the offseason is for roster construction, and that's all been paused. I mean, that's the big thing, especially here on December 3rd. Teams are usually packing up and getting ready to go to the winter meetings. So there'll be no winter meetings, at least for the big league teams. And, the off season, we even have a cute name for it, the hot stove. The hot stove is cool. So, yeah, there were a flurry of transactions, but there's still a whole lot of them to make. And who knows when teams are going to be able to make them. It all depended on how long this lockout lasts. Could be a few weeks, could be a couple months. When in a full season, this is an industry approaching $11 billion in revenues. I just can't believe that these two sides would be foolish enough to kill the golden goose, so to speak. So I personally, and it's just an opinion, I personally think they will get it worked out here over the course of the winter and in time to get these free agents signed and in time to complete roster construction heading into spring training. But who knows? I'm not overly alarmed by it. I know some folks are, but I'm not overly alarmed by it. It is the off season. It's 2.5 months to go before spring training, 4 months to go before opening day. There have been lockouts before, and never have they claimed actual games. The only thing that has cost games have been, player strikes. So I see this as a negotiating necessity by ownership, by management, by MLB, so they can, deadlines drive deals and it creates urgency. So I think and personally hope that they do get this worked out. I think they have some pretty deep issues, well beyond things on the field and speeding up play and DHs and stuff like that. And expanded playoffs. I mean, revenues have been going up, and believe it or not, the average salary of major leaguers has been going down. That might seem hard to believe with Bryce Harper and Machado and Tatis and Scherzer and Lindor and Corey Seager, with all those guys getting $300 million deals plus. But the average salary is going down, and they're kind of fighting for the average player here. To me, tanking is a really big problem in non-competitive teams, and that basically creates less demand for good players. And that those good players, those kind of mid-tier good players that can help you, are really feeling the pinch. So I think this is about fighting for them and maybe getting young players paid earlier, kind of restructuring things in their pay structure so that more dollars go in their pocket earlier, because front offices are really valuing those guys. So they do have issues. I've talked to a bunch of players over the last few years since the last CBA was signed, and they'll flat out tell you they think it was a bad CBA. So they're digging in and they want to sign a good one this time, a better deal for them. And they brought in a heavy hitter in this negotiator, Bruce Meyer. And, we'll see what happens. Two sides are going to go at it, but I really firmly believe that they will emerge with a new deal, only because I just think the revenues are so great in the game. Nobody wants to screw it up. I just think, obviously there's a PR hit here in the winter, but thank God it's not a PR hit where they're losing games, and hopefully they won't.
Well, when you talk about the length between now and the start of spring training, between now and the start of the regular season, if deadlines spur action, there's no deadline for the next couple months. So this could last well into February, right? I mean, what incentive does either side have to bend ahead of then? It's not like the players are losing any money right now. They're not getting paid during the offseason. They're not making their, yearly salary during this offseason period. The other thing I wanted to bring up is, so you mentioned.
Well, if I could interrupt you, I do think, the word lockout creates urgency itself, whether or not it's a deadline. It's not a deadline, but it creates urgency. And I also think what we saw, that flurry of activity over the last week, that is very indicative of the simple fact guys want to know where they're going to be. And I guarantee you, once Christmas comes, once the holidays come, and you're at home and mom is like, where are we going for spring training? That's going to create some urgency. So the urgency is that off seasons are short, and this 2.5 months before spring training is going to fly by. So I do think it creates urgency. Whether or not it creates urgency on December 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, okay, maybe not. But in the short term here, there's going to be some urgency, and they're going to need this time because there's a lot of work to do. But the ticking of the clock, the warming of the sun as spring training approaches, the need to know where you're going to be making your living in 2022 for the vast amount of players that are still out there, and the need to construct a roster or complete a roster construction so you can sell some tickets and open your spring training camps. To me, that's going to all act as a deadline, create the urgency you need. You might not feel it here on December 3, but I do think it's not far away.
With the slight reduction of the average MLB salary, I mean, when I see that, the first thing I think of is, well, front offices are not signing 33, 35-year-old players to big multi-year deals anymore. That's stuff that we saw as recently as 5 years ago, but teams just don't do that anymore. They've kind of learned that those contracts rarely work out for the aging players, especially post-steroid era. So when I see that reduction, that's the first thing I think of. And I guess that's why the big impetus on the players' side is that to get these guys paid earlier.
Yeah, they're valuing young talent more. So, whether it's a shorter arbitration, shorter road to arbitration, earlier free agency, guys want to get paid earlier. So, they make a big paycheck before they're flushed out of the game. But the tanking thing's a bad problem. When you got a third of your teams are uncompetitive, that creates less demand for players by a third, right? Less demand for good players by a third. So there are real issues here that they need to tackle, and it's not good for the game having all these teams that aren't competing and aren't trying to win. Getting rid of the tanking and improving that competitive balance would be really, really good for the sport, for both sides.
Well, I saw that part of the league's reported proposal was to include a draft lottery rather than the straight, worst record gets the first pick, right. Second worst record gets the second pick, but that it would only apply to the worst three teams. Like if you're one of the worst three teams, you're within that lottery. Do you think that's enough to combat tanking? I mean, it would prevent the teams that are 90-loss teams from wanting to become 105-loss teams to get the first pick potentially. I don't know if it changes the game enough in that regard. Yeah,
I just think, tying the draft to the place in your finish, and then when they put in those signing bonus limits of the slotting, that incentivized losing, and you got to get rid of that. The incentive to lose ball games. I don't know how you do it, but I don't think making the top three in the lottery is going to change it that much because the top three pick is still pretty darn good.
Yeah, and we still see, like in the NBA, for example, that even where there's the lottery system, teams still try to be the worst team in the league when they're that close to being it already. Well, the Phillies made some moves here before the lockout commenced. They signed Corey Knebel. That was the bigger move. A guy who is a high strikeout reliever, potentially could become their closer. Take us through that deal. I think people were surprised the 1 year, $10 million price tag in reference to 2 years, $17 million for Hector Neris or 2 years, $14 million for Mark Melancon. How did they come about that contract?
Well, I thought it sounded a little steep on a 1-year deal, and I was like, well, maybe they had to go there to get him on a 1-year deal. I'm sure he had other interests, Dodgers, and you just had to maybe overpay a little bit. But Dave Dombrowski said that was pretty much where they had to be. And he said they were willing to do a 2-year deal. The Phillies were willing to do a 2-year deal, and Corey Knebel only wanted a 1-year deal. And Dombrowski said Knebel's mindset is just reestablish himself as a dominant closer and go back out on the market and with a greater value next year. So, that could be win-win for the Phillies. They're going to obviously going to get his best. And if he has a big year, he's going to help him in 2022. And then if he's good enough, maybe you try to re-sign him. So it's a bet on. He's betting on himself. He wanted a 1-year deal to bet on himself, get back out there on the market next year. And I think you have to respect that because at essence, I mean, baseball, sports, it's about competition, and you want that. You want that inner competitor, and they obviously got that in this guy. So, there's some risk to the signing. Obviously, he's had some injury problems. He missed 2019 with Tommy John surgery. Didn't pitch all that well. Just in a brief little time in 2020. Had some injury issues in 2021 with the Dodgers, but it was a lat strain that sidelined him really for 3 months. When he was healthy, especially in the final 2 months, threw the ball very well. Strikeout stuff. Only pitched back-to-back days a couple of times, so that I think that's going to be something that is going to be a challenge that he's going to have to conquer in 2022. But Dave Dombrowski didn't promise him the closer's role, but it sounds like he's their closer. They think he can do it. They think he's got the stuff, the mentality, the makeup, the demeanor to handle it, and he's going to get the chance to win the role. And though Dombrowski said he didn't promise the guy that he was going to be the closer, Dombrowski also said he's not really pursuing another closer, anybody who profiles as a pure closer, barring an unforeseen opportunity. So, Corey Knebel is going to be the guy, and we'll see what he can do. Risky signing, but I think there's real potential for some good upside there. He was awfully good with the Brewers those couple of years, high strikeout totals. We've seen it many times. Guys come back quicker than ever from Tommy John surgery. They come back from the repair. But sometimes it takes them some time to just be that same guy again, get the feel back, get the command back, just be a pitcher again. So he'll be, a couple of years removed now, and maybe the Phillies will get the best he has to offer from that.
Got to imagine the Phillies like what they saw out of Knebel in the postseason. He appeared in all 3 rounds, 11 strikeouts in 5 innings. He really, last season, when he was healthy, was one of the better relievers in the National League. When you include playoffs, a 2.59 ERA, a whip under 1, 11.8 strikeouts per 9 innings. Guy has 260 strikeouts in his last 170 innings. That tells you the premier strikeout potential for Corey Knebel. It's clear the Phillies went for stuff here. You mentioned the risk. There's a risk with any reliever you sign. Right. There's a risk when you're signing a guy who makes 65 appearances year after year, like we saw with David Robertson, who had reached that threshold 10 consecutive seasons before joining the Phillies and immediately getting injured. So, I don't see him as way more risky than some of these other guys, but the Phillies still need to do a lot more in the bullpen when baseball returns, because it's not as if they can go into 2022 counting on Knebel and potentially returning Sir Anthony Dominguez and these waiver claims. They need to do more, wouldn't you say?
I would say, as we've talked about before, they had some interest in Michael Gibbons. I do not know where that stands going into the lockout, but I know they communicated directly with him. They apparently had a Zoom call with him. So maybe that heats up again after the break or after the lockout. But yeah, I think they need more. They kind of, they got 4 waiver claims and a minor trade in Nick Nelson. And I don't disagree with that strategy, adding quantity to maybe get one piece of quality out of it. I think they need to get lucky with one of those guys. They need a good year from Knebel, and they need more. They need more down there. In that bullpen, whether it's from one of those 4 guys or somebody steps up. But right now, heading into the lockout, it looks like they have 5 spots pretty well locked down in from back to front. I guess you'd say Knebel, Alvarado Brogdon, Sir Anthony Dominguez, and Sam Coonrod. There's some power down there. I said you kind of need a you need somebody to kind of emerge, maybe be a surprise. Wouldn't it be great if Sir Anthony, who now is he's not as far removed from Tommy John as Knebel is, but I mean, he's healthy. If he could give you something this year, that would be a really nice bonus. But I do think they need to keep looking in that bullpen because it's really been the fatal flaw. If you had to pick one fatal flaw in the last two teams, the last 2 years of the Phillies, they've had a number of flaws. Anybody who watched them play in 2021 knows how horrendous their defense was. But it got a little bit better toward the end of the season. But I would say the last 2 seasons, the number one flaw has been the bullpen. Short season of 2020, highest ERA ever. I know it was a short season, so you have to put that asterisk in there. But a 7 ERA in the bullpen, missed the playoffs by a game. Pretty much you could say that was the reason. And then they blew 34 saves in 2021 and missed the playoffs, stayed in the hunt till the end, but missed the playoffs. I think it's safe to say if you turn around a number of those games, even a handful of those games, standings might look a little bit different. Not all the blown saves came in the 9th inning, but they came late in games. So I think bullpen really, I know they need a left fielder and I know they need a center fielder, but I really think fixing that bullpen is Dombrowski's priority, and I agree with that.
Well, speaking of the corner outfield, I wanted to take your temperature on this. So right before the lockout, the Red Sox and the Brewers made a trade where the Red Sox sent Hunter Renfroe to Milwaukee, and they brought back Jackie Bradley Jr., their former defensive specialist center fielder, and a couple of prospects. And when I saw that, my first thought was, all right, the Red Sox are trading Hunter Renfroe, who hit 31 homers with 96 RBIs last season. They're getting a defensive-minded center fielder. Does that make them more likely to try to retain Kyle Schwarber when baseball comes back? Schwarber did not sign before the lockout. The Phillies were connected to him pretty heavily. You had been talking about their interest in Schwarber and Knebel for a couple days there. Do you think that Schwarber's going to have a bigger market when baseball comes back? There's also the potential that the designated hitter is universal, and that you would think would also increase his market.
He seems to think that because I think the Phillies were in serious pursuit of him, but he is willing to wait out the lockout. And, with the DH and possibly the Red Sox now having a spot for him, I think that probably increases his market and impacts the Phillies' pursuit of him. All indications I got is, they were trying to get him and lock him up and put him in left field and made a serious pursuit, try to get something done before the lockout. But I think he's going to have a pretty healthy market. We'll see where the Phillies stand when things get open again.
Well, the other deal the Phillies got done right before the buzzer on Wednesday was Johan Camargo, a bench piece, former Atlanta Brave, a guy who, as recently as 2017 was an everyday player with the Braves. In 2018, he hit 272, 19 homers, OPS over 800, lost his everyday spot when they signed Josh Donaldson and kind of faded out of the picture the last few years in Atlanta as Austin Riley has emerged. But do you see this as kind of like a Ronald Torreyes type signing? Jim, he hasn't played shortstop Camargo in the majors since 2019, but he has played that position. And reportedly, this is a $1.4 million one-year deal, which if true, that would imply that he's going to, make this bench.
Yeah, that sounds like he's going to be on their bench. Switch hitter, right?
Yep.
That's a good piece to have on your bench. He had some pop a few years ago in the big leagues. He had a really good year at AAA this year. It just wasn't a place for him on the big league roster. So it's not a huge amount of money. I think it's a solid, $1 million lottery ticket that you could possibly help you. But I do think I would put him right on that bench, and I would think he's got a spot on the bench with that commitment. Help you at a few different spots. I don't think it really precludes them from bringing back Ronnie Torreyes because the guy has sort of signed minor league deals forever and been very willing to go to AAA and wait for a chance. And when he gets a chance, he oftentimes does something to help you. It's when he has to play too much, he gets a little overexposed. So given the job Torreyes did last year for the team and the organization and Joe Girardi's affinity for him, I don't know that he's a priority, but if he needs a landing spot, I think he could end up right back in the Phillies organization on a minor league deal. And it wouldn't surprise me if he got big league time in 2022. I don't know how it's going to shake out, but we mentioned fleshing out the bullpen. They also need to flesh out that bench. So I would say he's move number one, or maybe move number two, because they acquired Garrett Stubbs to be ostensibly be their backup catcher. So, yeah.
Jim, the name that I've been asked about more than any other since the offseason began is Nick Castellanos, who did not sign. He's out there. He's probably going to get a humongous deal. He opted out of the final 2 years of his contract with the Reds, owed a combined $34 million over those 2 seasons. Have you heard anything in connection to the Phillies? I know that they don't want to lose the draft pick. Castellanos is a guy who has extended and rejected the qualifying offer. My opinion, he's the best offensive player left out there. What do you think?
I'm sure they've checked it out. He's a Scott Boras client, so the demand is the ask is going to be high, much like Chris Bryant. A few years ago, I remember there was a Scott Boras client out there named Jake Arrieta, and I mean, the Phillies were adamant they were not signing Jake Arrieta at this time of year, and his ask was 7 years, and then all of a sudden, spring training started, and March rolled around, and all of a sudden, Arrieta's ask was 3 years, and the Phillies got something done with him. So you can never say never. We'll see where his market goes when the game opens up again. I agree, he would crush this ballpark. But that qualifying offer is, to me, it's a deterrent. It's not, ironclad deterrent, but a potential deterrent, because they need to build this organization in this ball club with homegrown guys, and you can't just give away every year high draft picks. The farm system is getting a little bit better with Abel and Painter, 2 big arms the last 2 drafts. A couple other guys, Stott, who we'll probably see sometime in 2022. They need to keep adding those top draft picks. So you can't necessarily shed that draft pick, but if Castellanos' market and the deal fits you when the game opens up again, maybe it's a sacrifice you have to make. I don't know where it's going to go. I haven't heard a lot. We've heard Bryant's name a lot too, but every indication that I got leading up to the lockout was Schwarber was their main pursuit, and it didn't click. And I'm sure they'll get back in that. But you mentioned his market could be bigger, and we'll see. You can never say never, because you just don't know how market's going to develop and guys asks where they're going to be. There'll be a real urgency. If this thing goes to February 1st, there's going to be a real urgency for people to sign. Guys are going to be looking for landing spots. It might favor management, and you might get them on a palatable deal where you decide that you take the draft pick hit. But that remains to be seen. But I agree with you. I really like them.
On the theme of never saying never, what about Freddie Freeman? If the DH comes, you'd potentially have a position to play Rhys Hoskins. You could put Freeman at first. There's no better way to close the gap on the Braves than potentially getting their centerpiece, their best player, their best offensive player. I saw that the Yankees and Blue Jays have some interest, and it looks like Freeman, that deal might go as high as 6 years. What percent is there? A 5% chance? A 1% chance? What do you think?
Less than 1, I would say. Though, if I was the Phillies GM, I think I would make that call. Not trying to be antagonistic or anything, but I certainly would check the lay of the land. And it's risky poker playing to try to drive the price up on a division opponent, but I would check out everything if I were running the Phillies. I would check out everything, and it's good to know what your opponents are up to. I'm not saying agents would divulge that, but we are hearing about the Yankees. You hear about the Dodgers. I would be stunned if Freddie Freeman does not have an A on his cap next year. But that's just me. I mean, it'd be awfully tough to lose him. Did you see the speech he gave at their World Series championship rally? I think it finished back at the ballpark. It was one of the best and most articulate and thoughtful parade speeches that I really have ever heard. It was full of appreciation and respect. It dripped with class. Freddie Freeman. He hit all the right notes, mentioned all the right people. If I'm running the Braves, I want that kid with an A on his hat for the rest of his career, but that's just me.
I'll have to go find that. The only video I saw of the Braves parade was the video that went viral of like the floats driving by 50 miles per hour and the people who camped out getting to see their guys for about 0.5 seconds.
Well, that's what happens when you build a ballpark in the middle of a freeway. I mean, that ballpark, it sits like in the middle of, at the intersection of all these freeways where people drive 100 miles an hour, and then there's like these clover leaves, and then there's a ballpark with like a mall around it. It's different, but it's a nice park. I like it.
And one more thing to look forward to this weekend, Jim, Dick Allen has a chance to finally get into the Hall of Fame.
Absolutely, and I'm really pulling for him. I think it's long overdue. He unfortunately he passed away a year ago on December 7th, and that was the weekend the vote was supposed to take place. It was postponed, pushed back by the pandemic. So it's that group, the Golden Days era, is reconvening in Orlando this weekend. They have not met since 2014 when Dick Allen came one vote short. So there's a lot of momentum for him to make it. I think his career has been viewed through a new prism in recent years, and he's gained a whole lot of well-deserved appreciation for the career he had. And, hats off to people like Mark Carfagno for that. He was a longtime Phillies groundskeeper who really pushed for Dick to get into the Hall of Fame, or has pushed for Dick to get into the Hall of Fame. Mike Schmidt, who is likewise has pushed, and John Middleton, who has almost made it a personal mission, Phillies managing partner. So the Phillies retired Dick Allen's number in September of 2021, his number 15. And that was a really a wonderful honor. And boy, I think there's a lot of momentum. Sunday evening, 6 o'clock, when the vote is revealed, for him to finally get into Cooperstown, the ultimate baseball honor. Unfortunately, he's not with us to potentially experience that. But I hope he's looking down, and I hope he gets to, and hope he and his family get to experience that. You look at the 11-year stretch he had, and when you can measure him up right with the game's best, if not even above some of these guys, Hank Aaron and them. Go look at his 1966 season sometime. It's like, wow. So, yeah, I'm really hoping Dick Allen gets in. Had the pleasure of meeting him a few times. And his number is on the wall at Citizens Bank Park, number 15. And hopefully next July his plaque will be on the wall in Cooperstown. I think it's richly deserved. I think it's grossly overdue. But the time might be here. So we'll see Sunday night, Corey.
Yep, keep an eye on that Sunday night, 6 p.m. We'll have it all covered on NBC Sports Philadelphia. Hoping to see Dick Allen finally get in. He's Jim Salisbury. I'm Corey Seidman. Thanks a lot for listening to the Phillies Talk podcast.